All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me here today. So for our movement tutorial this particular week, we are going to look at a tool, Parallettes. All right, a lot of people, I don't think, use this tool, aren't familiar with them. Very simple. Every time I go to the park, it seems, well, just the other day I had somebody who's like, hey, where'd you get the Parallettes from? I don't know. People just don't use them, or they think they're like this foreign thing. You can find them online anywhere. Amazon has everything, obviously. Rogue sells Parallettes. Or you can very simply go onto YouTube, and it's very simple to make your own out of some PVC pipe. Again, if you just YouTube how to make Parallettes, I bet you're going to have a handful of videos that come up. Very, very simple. Home Depot, Lowe's, you can get all the goods you need, everything. And probably for $30, you can make a pair of your own Parallettes. All you do is really need like a saw, some glue, and again, just watch a YouTube video. Very simple to make. So why use Parallettes? Like, it's a tool, so why is it any different than any other tool, or what makes this unique or special? I would say a few things, but number one, a lot of times if individuals have issues with the wrists touching the floor, this definitely gives a different wrist angle. So instead of your palm being flat onto the floor, for example, in maybe handstand work or any push-up work or anything like that, we can hold on. So instead of the angle of the wrist being like so, when you grab onto a Parallette, you can see that the wrist angle is now straight. So this will put pressure on the pad of the thumb, but way, way less pressure on the wrist itself. So a lot of times it can be helpful just for individuals starting off that are not comfortable yet with the wrist touching the floor. So very good there. One other thing that they add as well is they add some depth. So one of the things we'll be talking about in just a moment is, for example, like with the push-up, if you're performing a push-up on the floor, your palms are on the floor and maybe your chest can touch down at the same height. But if you're on the floor, your chest cannot go beyond or deeper than where your palms would be. Where, for example, you can have your head or your chest sink deeper, so it's going further than where your palms are. So we would call this like a deficit push-up. So it allows you to do that as well, as a few some other things as well. So for example, even like in a little bit, we'll be talking about holding an L-sit. So if you can't hold the L-sit on the floor just yet, sometimes this again gives us advantages because the body parts can be below where the hands are, and that will make a little bit more sense in a moment when we start to show you a few different moves. So pretty versatile, very simple to make, $30 maybe, very easy to throw in the back of your car. So if you're at a park, you can just pull out your Parallettes. So yeah, so a fun, great tool. And don't be scared about them. Again, a YouTube video real quick. You can figure out how to make them. It's pretty simple stuff. All right. So what can we do with them now? So we're going to break down about 7 different movements or so, looking at the Parallettes, and I will break them up into bent arm strength and then straight arm strength, and then also to progressions. So always work at the fundamental ground base level first before you advance into the more challenging moves. But you have a good amount of time with these, so again, just progress over the course of months. Let's dive right into bent arm push-up. So just the regular push-up can absolutely be performed on Parallettes, and this is why I would say would be a good starting point for bent arm strength, a push-up. And again, the wrist angle will make it easier on the wrists. So, for example, I can bring the Parallettes apart like so. I'm going to grip the Parallettes, and I'm just going to try to perform a push-up. Now, my hands, rather, are a little bit higher than my feet, so this will be maybe a slightly bit easier push-up than typical. I want to try to keep my tailbone tucked, and I would bend at the elbows, and then press right up from there. So again, just a regular push-up with a little bit different angle here on the wrists. So I would see if you could first build yourself up to the strength to maybe where you're performing, maybe starting off with initially maybe 10, but then trying to build up to maybe where we can accomplish maybe 15 or 20 push-ups on Parallettes, trying to keep the elbows in nice and close as well. But then we can move to deficit push-ups as a next step. So if you notice, I just moved the Parallettes a little bit further apart as far as how far apart they are. That just has to do with your body structure and kind of like how wide the shoulders are. But if we are going to try to find on this next push-up, which is considerably, I would say, considerably more challenging than the first, we are going to try the deficit push-up. So my chest will again sink below the level of the parallettes, which is basically in essence where my hands are. So I'm going to move the parallettes a little bit further apart to allow for my chest to move through. And then again, like so, I would come down to my regular push-up height, but then I can see if I can go down even deeper and then trying to press up from there. So that extra inch or two that I get out of it, or 3 or 4, pressing up, makes it considerably more challenging. All right, it will be a good amount of pressure also on the shoulders, so please build up the strength first, again slowly building up. So we would consider that one a deficit push-up. All right, and again maybe slowly working those, so maybe the chest even starts getting closer and closer to the floor. Again, listen to the shoulders, very challenging stuff. Another one too, using the ability here that it allows us to go into that deficit would be a handstand push-up. Now, I'm going to show you the basic foundational version of this one. The other harder versions, they get quite more challenging. So I think this is a very good place that we can all start. So the handstand push-up is really, I'm going to now change greatly the angle that my initial push-up from my initial push-up. But in essence, it is still a bent arm push. We're just now pushing overhead with our arms rather than straight out in front of us. So I would want a little more distance here between the parallettes. And I'm going to try to come really, really high on my tippy toes. You can always prop yourself up onto a plyo box as well. So you can elevate the feet in all of these things that I'm going to show you. So I'm now going to try to lead with my head. Again, you see how high I am on the tippy toes. I'm going to try to lead with my head. I'll stick the butt up. Maybe the head touches the floor. My shoulders, the heads of my shoulders here are touching the tops of the parallettes. And I'll try to push up from there, again trying to keep the arms overhead. So then I'll bend, the elbows stay in, tapping down, and then pressing up from there. Over time, as you get stronger and stronger with these, again, you can definitely elevate the height of the feet to make it more challenging. You can always kind of just like lean forward, and then at the bottom, maybe it's a little lift, and then pressing from there as well. So there's always fun little things that you can do to kind of change to make things a bit more challenging. But again, just the initial version I showed you, just overhead press, again very similar to the push-up, but now we're pressing overhead, high in the tippy toes, elevate the feet somehow, butt goes high in the air, and you want your angle to be more down. Coming back up, again we get to use the space here below where our hands are to add to make things more challenging. So those are just a few of the bent arm strength ones. This final one I'm going to show you, in my opinion, is considerably more challenging than the others. Recommend highly, again, starting and slowly progressing. So this would be a tucked planche push-up. All right, so I am going to show you the tucked planche in our straight arm as well. So I will show you here first, though, how the tucked planche push-up would go. In essence, I'm going to try to lift my feet up into my chest. So I'll try to tuck into this ball as best as I can. Now, just holding that position itself will be considerably challenging. And then from there, we're going to try to bend the arms and trying to keep the body in that tucked position. So I will demonstrate one or two here. I'm going to try to press up. I'll bend the elbows, press up, bend, shoulders can tap, press up, and again, notice I was tucked the whole time. So, bent arm, strength, tucked planche push-ups, pretty high up, quite challenging. So again, see if you can slowly build. Much more challenging again as our whole body is tucked. The feet are hovering now off the ground. If you are familiar with yoga practice, it's kind of like Lolasana pose, but where we're pressing for reps. So again, a move that we can get stronger with on the parallettes. All of these things as well, I think will greatly transfer over, if indeed you do have a yoga practice, to all the different arm balances and transitions in particular that you might find in an advanced yoga class. So that was about 4 or so bent arm moves. We'll look now at a few straight arm moves. So Number one, foundational strength. A scap plank hold where we're just trying to protract and press the shoulder blades up to the ceiling. So again, it's nothing more than just a plank, right? I'm leaning forward, but I want to try to press. So if you notice, my shoulder blades are rounding, and then over time I can even lean forward and push. When performing these, I am trying to rotate. So the pit of the elbow is forward. So for example, if you look here at my right elbow, I'm trying to rotate pit of the elbow forward, leaning forward and pushing, and then just trying to round the upper back. So again, all of these moves will involve the arms staying straight arm strength in our push work. So again, pressing, holding, trying to press the shoulder blades up for time, however long you can hold, maybe building up over time to a minute in time, all right? So that's, I would say, very foundational, functional. In the beginning, just work on the high plank. Excuse me. Also, the L-sit now. Considerably more challenging than the plank that we just showed. And I would say two versions of the L-sit. Definitely, first version, do not worry about extending the legs out into the L shape. I would say hold a tucked L-sit. So the first step would be, now we're bringing the feet to the inside of the parallettes. I'm going to place my palms down, and I'm just going to see if I can press, trying to get my ears away from my shoulders. I'm going to get on my tippy toes, and I'm just going to hold here for time. Maybe someday the toes begin to lift. A tucked L-sit. When the day comes, you get comfortable there. We'll hold that with the option of extending the legs out like so. The L-sit. Over time, the L-sit begins to look like a V-sit. I think perhaps that's a tutorial in itself. The V-sit where the legs start to move up. Challenging part with the L-sit, it's all challenging, but in particular with the L-sit, is trying not to allow your shoulders to cave in. This is very, very normal stuff, especially in the beginning. And I would say it's okay. We have to build that strength. But over time, we want to see if we can start to get the chest forward and the shoulders back. So I'll show you two extreme examples, perhaps. Right, here's a very internally rounded L-sit. We want to move over time to where the chest is forward, and we can perhaps take our L-sit straighter, not so rounded, forward. Takes time, little adjustment. See if over time you can move in that direction. So our L-sits like so. All right? A few straight arm ones. Let's see what else we have. So the tucked L-sit versus when the legs extend. And then in the bent arm approach, we did show you the planche push-ups with the bent arms. So just holding the top will be considered a tucked planche hold. Again, straight arm strength. And if you saw the very first thing we did, it was the plank, right, when I was protracting my scapula and pressing my blades up. This is pretty much the same, but considerably more difficult in now that the legs are tucked into the body and hovering off the floor versus feet being on the ground. But what you're doing as far as the pressing is exactly the same. We're trying to press with two straight arms. We're trying to rotate the pit of the elbows forward, and we're trying to round the upper back. So we would hold this one for time. So again, set it up. Notice my upper back's rounding. I'm going to try to tuck my feet up into my glutes, and my knees are going to try to tuck up into my belly as well. And I'm holding for time. Challenging stuff. Get really, really strong first in the plank, pressing until you eventually. Now that one, you can absolutely, definitely get stronger with the L-sits first, right, for that one. But you can absolutely keep your tippy toes on the ground and kind of just let them be on the brink of hovering versus kind of maybe touching down before you take all the weight in the tucked planche. So it could look like this. Pressing up, I go on my tippy toes, and I'm just pressing, and I'm trying to get light in my toes. Maybe they lift for a moment. Maybe I bring them down. Press, press, press. Maybe they lift for a little. So you can play around always with that as well. I've seen some individuals also in a tucked planche hold. You could use perhaps a strap. But just building the strength slowly over time. Someday seeing if you can build yourself up to the tucked planche hold. All right, one last one. Up until this point, we've showed you a few that involve bent arms. We've shown you a few that involve straight arms. We're now going to see if we can go from a straight arm movement into a bent arm movement, and also how we can go from a straight arm and move into another straight arm. So these are just two different movements that I like to kind of throw in. Both of these, I would say, are a bit more advanced, but this involves us now starting to move and transition on the parallettes. The first one, I will go straight arm to straight arm. Now we've done both of these, so can we go from the L-sit into the tucked planche for reps, back into the L-sit, back into the tucked planche. The arms will remain straight the entire time. Again, challenging stuff. This is how it would look. I'll do one rep for you here. We'll go from the L-sit, tuck, straighten out the arms, tucked planche, L-sit, tucked planche. Okay, so you can transition between the two of them. Please see here also, the arms remain straight the whole time. I would highly suggest, before you put those movements together, get really good at each of them individually. Then see if you can start to transition between the two. Final one, I'll go from an L-sit with two straight arms. I'm going to transition, bend my elbows. I'm going to allow the shoulder heads to rest on the parallettes. And I'm going to have two bent arms and try to extend my legs up as if I'm preparing for a handstand push-up. So now we'll go from straight arms to bent arms. This is how it would look. L-sit, tuck, bend, let the shoulder heads rest on the parallettes. Try to extend the legs out, pause, squeeze your posterior chain. Tuck, transition, straighten out the arms, L-sit, tuck, bend, shoulder heads tap, straightening out the legs. We did this in our movement class this week, and the one thing I would suggest, if you're at this level, from the L-sit, we bend, allow your shoulders to rest here initially. Over time, we'll create a little bit of space so we can hold that bent arm position with our shoulders hovering, maybe an inch or two off the mat. Again, not in the beginning. Progress into that. And then over time, we're maybe pressing out of this into a handstand push-up or something, even further. Who knows? The other thing, though, is when you do rest the shoulders down, and you come into that position, I would first just hold a tucked position. I was spotting individuals this week, placing my palm on the lower back. Before you get comfortable on these, before you learn where to distribute the weight, before you build strength, it's unstable, it's new, it's different. So it's very easy to start to lift up into the tucked position, and then just to have the butt just keep going, and we fall backwards, fly over this, we land on our back. Not a good look, but it happens. And we kind of have to learn that. So it's not bad if that happens. You kind of learn what going too far forward feels like. So I would even just hold the tucked position before extending the legs, unless you feel really confident and okay there. And again, sometimes it's helpful if you do have somebody to help spot you to work on these different movements. But then again, those two things were, again, things that you can progress into slowly over time, starting with the foundational level. So that's parallettes, guys. If you take a look at them, yes, a few, just not, too many pieces. You have like a T here, you have an elbow here. This is just some PVC pipe that was cut. It's 1 1/4 inch. So I use 1 1/4 inch. You can definitely choose some different sizes, but I wouldn't go too much smaller not really under an inch. You want them to be strong enough, and then it's just a little bit of proxy and some glue that holds them together. So that is your tutorial and intro to parallettes. Again, pretty lightweight. You can take them anywhere, and I'm sure you can find a pair of metal ones of all different heights as well. Some are considerably lower to the ground. You'll also see parallettes that are about 3 feet off the ground. So it depends on what you're doing with them, how you're working. On parallettes at this height, it's really hard to do any pulling work. Higher parallettes allow you to get underneath of them and start to do some pull work, rows, levers, whatever it is. These, again, are just pretty basic ones. So hope you enjoyed it. If you ever have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, come to class if you want. Sign up, talk to us, DM us. Thank you for following along on this Patreon account. If you have any questions or suggestions, again, reach out. Thank you. And we'll see you again on the flip side. Go make some parallettes, grab them, have questions, holler. All right, guys, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. Namaste. Later.